Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Portland debate on Measure 26-184, the ballot measure to amend the Multnomah County Charter to limit contributions and expenditures in elections for county candidates, as well as to require disclosure of the sources of certain contributions. I'm Molly Keating, representing the League, and I will be your moderator. The League of Women Voters works to help citizens make informed choices in elections. The goal of this debate is to give you information that will be helpful as you decide upon your vote. Our co-sponsors for this debate are the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, and the Links Incorporated. The Links Incorporated is a volunteer service organization of professional women of color who are committed to strengthening African American communities through public information, education, economic development, and public policy. The mission of the NAACP is to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate race-based discrimination. The mission of the League of Women Voters is to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation in government. This debate is being recorded for rebroadcast and online streaming by Metro East Community Media. Funding for the recording was provided by the Multnomah Bar Foundation. Additional funding for our voter forums is provided by Paloma Clothing. Our speakers for this debate are Juan Carlos Ordóñez, who will be speaking in favor of the measure, and Auditor Steve March, who will speak against it. And they've asked to use their first names this evening. Juan Carlos was a member of the Multnomah County Charter Review Committee and is currently a volunteer supporting the Yes campaign for Measure 26-184. Juan Carlos is a lawyer by training with a wide range of interests, from commercial litigation in New York to sustainable development for indigenous communities in Guatemala. He works as the communications director for the Oregon Center for Public Policy, but emphasizes that his work there is not connected with the campaign. The opposing speaker, Steve March, has been the Multnomah County Auditor since 2009. He served 3 terms in the Oregon House of Representatives prior to his election as auditor. Steve has worked as a fiscal officer for Multnomah County and Portland State University, as well as a staff member for the Board of County Commissioners. Steve is a certified internal auditor and has a PhD and master's in urban studies. Before coming to Oregon, he was active on California commissions dealing with elections and reapportionment and economic development. Measure 26-184 was placed on the ballot by the Multnomah County Charter Review Committee. If it passes, this measure would limit the amount of any contribution to a candidate or to a candidate committee supporting candidates for elected office in Multnomah County. It also would limit independent expenditures on behalf of a candidate and require disclosure of certain sources of money for supporting candidates. Parts of this measure may be challenged in court. We will begin this debate with 4-minute opening statements by each speaker, after which the speakers will answer questions. Audience questions may be written on the 3x5 index cards that volunteers in the aisles are distributing. She's holding the cards up in the back there. Audience members, if you have a question to ask our speakers, please signal the League member standing in the aisle for a card and print your question legibly on that card. Return it to the League member. Juan Carlos, your opening statement is first. You have 4 minutes.
Well, thank you so much to the League for organizing this forum, and thank you to Steve for agreeing to this debate and making it possible. I'm going to start by reading a quote. The cost of running for public office has escalated in the last 30 years to the point where many competent and willing citizens cannot participate as candidates. The problem extends from the presidential campaigns to those of Congress, statewide and legislative offices, to county and city races. This is from a research report from the League of Women Voters of Oregon in 2004. And since then, the elections have only gotten more expensive. The system has only gotten more out of balance since then. Part of the problem is that here in Oregon, and by extension Multnomah County, there are no limits into how much money can flow into campaign races. We are only one of 6 states in the nation to place no limits. But the problem of money in politics is not just the flow of money into campaigns. It's the kind of money. The real problem is big money in politics, like the $50,000 and $80,000 in campaign checks that Phil Knight just dumped into Oregon's races. Now, we all recognize that candidates need money to run for office, but we know also that money flowing into politics distorts the political process. You know, if you think that big money doesn't flow into Multnomah County, you should go read the information that's available in Orstar, and you will see that tens of thousands of dollars flows into candidates' races here in the county. Big money allows the wealthy, corporations, and special interests to exercise undue influence into who gets elected and what policies get enacted. Big money in politics is inherently anti-democratic. It makes our political system unresponsive to the will of the people, and it breeds cynicism about our political institutions. The 2004 League of Women Voters report concluded something needs to be done. Well, the great news is that now we can do something about it right here in Multnomah County. Measure 26-184 is a unique opportunity to get big money out of politics in our county races. The measure was put on the ballot by the Multnomah County Charter Review Commission, and I had the honor of serving in this committee that was made up of ordinary citizens from all corners of our county. And we were simply guided by our good conscience and common sense. No one received a campaign contribution to serve. And that's part of the reason why we were able to put in such a strong campaign finance reform measure on the ballot. So the measure does three things. It limits contributions to candidates. It limits independent expenditures, how much money you can spend outside of the candidates themselves attacking or supporting candidates. And it sets strong disclosure requirements, forcing the funders of a political ad to disclose their true identity. So a group like Chevron cannot hide behind a cute name like, the Committee for Clean Air. This measure is going to empower voters and ordinary voters and candidates not beholden to big money. It's going to force candidates to talk to the people, to go out there and really listen to their interests, not spend all day on the phone talking to wealthy donors. It will make it so that a candidate with good ideas and a strong message can run a viable campaign, even if they aren't rich or well-connected. So the choice before us is clear. We can wait for Congress and the Oregon legislature to act to get big money out of politics, but I think that if we do that, we will be waiting a very, very long time. Or we can act now here in Multnomah County by voting yes on Measure 26-184. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have the opening statement from an opponent of this measure, Auditor Steve March. You also have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Molly. And first, I'd like to also thank the League of Women Voters of Portland for holding this forum. The League has long championed nonpartisan discourse regarding.
Is it okay if we start Mr. March's time over? Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Not used to sitting on this side of the dais. So, thank you, Molly. First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters of Portland for hosting this voter forum. The League has long championed nonpartisan political discourse to help inform the voters, and I'd like to thank you and the League and all League members. Second, I'd also like to thank Juan Carlos and the other members of the Charter Review Committee who spent many hours over many months of service to the county discussing these issues and bringing forth a number of proposals. You've heard, this is the second one you've heard in this forum. I find myself in an unusual position, for I've been a supporter of campaign finance reform since the 1970s. I first worked on fuller transparency in campaign reporting, and I believe in campaign finance disclosure. I don't think corporations are people, and I oppose the use of 501 C4 committees, which are also known as dark money, that hide the source of funding in any political campaign. So why am I here in opposition of 26-184, the campaign finance referral? I believe the campaign finance reform proposal and the arguments accompanying the voters' pamphlet are misleading and misdirected, not thoroughly formulated, and are flawed, and it's a potentially extremely costly to the county, both if we implement it or if we follow the ultimate goal of this measure, and that's take it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. I urge the voters to carefully read all 22 arguments related to this measure. See which ones really apply to the county races and which are really about something else, such as the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Citizens United, state legislative races, which have been mentioned, or the city of Portland. Let me give you some of the details on these 3 points. Misleading and misdirected. As I say, much of the Charter Review Committee's report and the discussion in the ballot measure arguments are talking about state elections. State elections like the top Senate candidates reaching in the states reaching $750,000 for a campaign, which is a lot of money for districts of only 77,000 registered voters. So almost $10 a registered voter. That is bad. The House is even worse when measured by the top races. And it would, they're $17.75 per registered voter. The county race is around $1.07 for the county chair race that has been mentioned. And the county commissioner races are also under $2, $1.37. So the problem isn't at the county. The measure's not thoroughly formulated and flawed. Small donor committees aren't mentioned in the proposal. And a small point, that one is, but really the contribution and expenditures have been determined by the state and the United States to be a form of free expression. So thank you. It's also potentially extremely costly if we have to defend this in court or implement it, because there's not any financing provided.
Thank you. In the next part of the debate, we'll ask each speaker to answer questions about the measure. They'll each have 1 minute and 15 seconds to answer each question. The first question is for both people, starting with Juan Carlos. The question: how would you structure a campaign finance reform system that would not be challenged in court as unconstitutional? Explain why such a system would be better or worse than the current proposal.
The current measure has 3 parts. Campaign contribution limits to how much candidates can receive, limits on independent expenditures, and the disclosure requirements. Those disclosure requirements stand on solid legal grounds. It's a similar provision as exists currently in California. So this part of this measure is something that is not really subject to any strong legal challenge. The other 2 parts, part of the goal is to set up a challenge. Look, right now, under the last Oregon Supreme Court ruling 20 years ago, it said that that you can spend any amount of, you can give candidates any amount of money that you want. That allows big money to flow into our system. That's a problem. So it needs to be challenged. And sometimes the only way to get a challenge done is by setting up a challenge. It is the right of the people of the county to protect our local elections. We have a local democracy here, and we need to protect it. So it is well within our rights to set up this challenge, which is the only way to get things done. Thank you.
Thank you. And Steve, to answer the same question, how would you structure a campaign finance reform system that would not be challenged in court as unconstitutional? Explain why such a system would be better or worse than the current proposal.
Well, it could have been easily done. They could have provided for campaign financing, public financing in this, some sort of quid pro quo system where fees are waived in exchange for the campaigns to take part in this particular financing scheme, there are a number of ways of making it better. They didn't choose that because they don't want this to work. They want to be able to challenge it in state court and eventually at higher court.
Thank you. The next question from our audience, and Steve, will have you begin, 1 minute and 15 seconds. The question: if this charter amendment passes and eventually is upheld by the courts, what would be the effects not only on Multnomah County, but also on other jurisdictions and other candidate campaigns throughout Oregon? Please address both potentially positive and negative effects.
Thank you. On the negative side, there's a number of features that aren't currently covered in state law. For example, I mentioned small donor committee. So there would probably be the necessity to get the state to create that in state law. It also calls for someone to a review of, obviously, the campaign expenditure reports, which means there's some cost to that. It talks about levying fines. So somebody has to be in a position to levy fines. And when you have fines, you have to have a quasi-judicial process in case there's an appeal. So all of these are a multitude of steps that don't make this thing work. As I'd mentioned before, there are ways of making it work, but that was not the chosen route. I myself would have liked to have seen it as a functioning system. I don't think it would affect any other jurisdiction unless it's proven as a statewide in the state Supreme Court saying yes, this could be applied to other counties.
Thank you. Juan Carlos, the same question. If this charter amendment passes and eventually is upheld by the courts, what would be the effects not only on Multnomah County, but also on other jurisdictions and other candidate campaigns throughout Oregon? Please address both potentially positive and negative effects.
If this is enacted by the voters here and it's ultimately upheld in the courts, this will have huge implications for our county, our state, and our nation. It would be truly historic. I don't think you can minimize the impact that it would have to the good. Right now, it's not just in our county, but it's nationwide that big money is a problem. And so this would strike really at the heart of what's plaguing our political system. Now, Steve raises some concerns about costs. The cost would be minimal. Truly, in the context of a $1.5 billion budget that Multnomah County has, this is truly insignificant. If the responsibility were to fall to the auditor's office to implement this, I'm confident that Steve and his team would do a very great job in doing it efficiently. And the legal costs are, in 2014, there were 164 litigations handled by the Multnomah County Legal Department. One more case, I'm confident they can handle it with no problem. Any investment in our democracy is a very good investment. Any improvement to our democracy has an administrative costs, and it's money well spent. This would be historic, tremendous for our people and for our nation.
Thank you. This next question says it is mostly for Steve March. So I think we'll start with you, Steve, if that's okay.
That's fine.
And Juan Carlos, you're welcome to chime in next. The question is, would you favor any cap on donations from a single source? If so, how would you enact it?
Yes, actually, I have no problem with the concept of caps on donations. It's this proposal that's flawed. I ran in 1996 for the first time in Oregon under a $100 cap limitation. I thought that was actually an experience that leveled the playing field at that time. But again, this proposal doesn't do that because it's really designed to go to court. And it also leaves out the races regarding ballot measures. There are no ballot measures are not covered under this. So any kind of funding or spending could be done for or against ballot measures. They're not part of this. And that's one of the fatal flaws for me. I believe in full disclosure. Thank you.
Thank you. Juan Carlos?
Well, this puts a limit of $500 per individual donating to a candidate. So if you were in favor of $100, it seems that you should be in favor of this $500 limit. One thing that this allows is for small donors committee to be formed, and they can give as much money as they want to a candidate so long as they raise that money in $100 increments. And what this does, it elevates the small donor. It really levels the playing field. Now, in terms of the point raised about spending on ballot measures, look, we couldn't address every single problem in our political system. We passed a measure that was targeted at big money, but no, we don't claim it's going to solve every problem, but it's going to do a great deal of good in targeting a big problem that currently exists.
Thank you. The question, and we'll start with Juan Carlos. In 2006, Oregon voters, in fact, passed CFR similar to 26-184. However, the last 3 secretaries of state failed to implement it, and the last 3 attorneys failed to enforce it. Why? Attorneys General. Attorneys General failed to enforce it.
It's not an issue that I'm so intimately familiar with, so I won't address that. What I do know is that that did not lead to a legal challenge, as you mentioned. And ultimately, the path forward, because there has been no action by the Oregon legislature, the path forward is to set up a legal challenge, both here in Oregon and frankly at the national level with Citizens United. Congress is not riding to our rescue either. So it looks like the only path forward is to set up a legal challenge. And what better place to do it than here in Multnomah County? We have a local democracy to protect. And we will be doing ourselves a favor and potentially the state of Oregon a favor and our nation a favor by doing this.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, this proposal's got enough flaws that I don't think it is the vehicle for that challenge. I believe, the county attorney could decide, basically as the state did, that this proposal is unconstitutional under state law and not implement it, just as the state did not implement it. So that would require some action on from the outside. So it could be a stalemate once more. This is all about a legal challenge to other issues, and Multnomah County is not the place to start because the problem isn't here. We don't have the big spending elections like they have across the river or they have down in Salem. Our elections, spending $1 per registered voter or $1.50 per registered voter is nothing really in a campaign. It's hard to reach your voters. So the county is not the problem. The problem is at the state level and at the across the river at the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Now is the time for our 90-second closing, and we will start with the supporter, Juan Carlos. 90 seconds.
The problem is a structural problem. The fact that unlimited money can flow into campaign contributions. Steve says that we don't have a problem here in Multnomah County. Well, look at the size of contributions that are given to candidates. Tens of thousands of dollars in county races. And money influences outcomes. That's why donors give money, because it has an impact. If you spend all day calling for big dollars, you tend to, the priorities of your donors become your priorities often. It's not determinative, but often. It's simple human nature that their priorities will become your priorities. The question for you is, if you think that big money is a problem, if you think that big money is a problem in our political system, you should vote yes for this measure. It will even the playing field. it will get big money out of the problem. This measure is specifically targeted for getting big money out of politics in our county. There's no one riding to our rescue. Congress and the Oregon legislature haven't shown any inclination to act. You'll be waiting a long, long time for them to act. The time to act is now by voting yes on Measure 26-184 and protecting our local democracy here in Multnomah County. Thank you.
Thank you. 90 seconds, Steve.
Thank you. I really have concerns about this measure, and I also have deep concerns about the campaign being run on it. If you read carefully all of those arguments, there are 22 arguments in the voters' pamphlet. 20 out of 22 were paid for by the Campaign Committee Honest Elections. That campaign committee itself was funded, 97% of the funding came from a 501c4. So you don't find out who funded that and who's running this campaign from looking at that voters pamphlet. That's a problem. Full disclosure is the answer, and this doesn't get to it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the time we have. Thank you to our speakers for participating in our debate. We also thank Metro East Community Media for recording and broadcasting this debate. Please check your program and consult the League's website, lwvpdx.org. That's the Portland chapter of the League of Women Voters, for more information, including dates and times of the rebroadcasts. Our co-sponsors here tonight are the NAACP and the Links Incorporated. They're not only co-sponsors, but they're collaborators and partners in our mutual efforts to inform the voters so that they can make informed decisions and participate as one vote, one person in our voting system. The program is supported by funding from the Multnomah Bar Foundation and Paloma Clothing. The League of Women Voters also produces a neutral voter's guide, which includes thorough coverage of all the state ballot measures and local city and county measures. The League's voters' guides are free and available at the county elections office and in branches of Multnomah County libraries. You will also be able to find the voter's guide online at lwvpdx.org. Once again, all together now, lwvpdx.org. Remember that Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Ballots will be mailed to voters on or about October 20th and must be delivered to an official drop-off site anywhere in Oregon no later than 8 p.m. on Tuesday, November 8th, or mailed to arrive by that date. Postmarks do not count. The last day to register to vote is October 18th. The League's next public meeting will be November 14th at 7 o'clock p.m. here at the Multnomah County Building. The topic will be Election Methods. Is there a better way to vote? Please check our website, lwvpdx.org, for details. And when I say we, it's the Portland chapter of the League of Women Voters. This is Molly Keating for the League of Women Voters of Portland. Please be informed and remember that your vote is important. Thank you for watching our debate on ballot measure 26-184. Good night.